Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Sport with me, Jamie Davis, and alongside me for this video is Jack Price, and we are going to talk about the Styrian Grand Prix, which really is Austrian Grand Prix .2, and well, it was actually another Mercedes win, but this time it was Lewis Hamilton. He finally got himself a win for the season, which means for the last 14 years he has at least one Grand Prix win each year, which is quite an incredible stat, really. And for how long he's been in F1 now, it feels like forever. But Jack, he's on top again. Another win for Lewis Hamilton. But really, I don't think we were surprised. That qualifying lap he did in the rain on Saturday, he was over a second quicker than every other car, including Bottas, which just shows it's going to be so hard to beat him again this season.
Yeah, that qualifying lap was something special, and it really was. It was a joy to watch. To be fair, the qualifying as a whole, I was really worried that we were going to go into that Saturday and they just like call it off, and it'd be like, oh, what's the point in that? Got like they kept saying, you sort of got the best drivers in the world in the best sort of cars and that, and if you're not utilizing that in the rain or something, then it's a waste. And I was really glad that they did it, and it was fun actually, because even Q1 was interesting because everyone was set in decent times, and you had the grid order was crazy at one point where you had like George Russell in first and Sainz in second, and it was like, oh god, what could happen here? But ultimately Lewis Hamilton put in a mega lap, and it was ultimately deserved that he would be on pole position come race day. And he just looked from the get-go when the green lights came on, he just looked untouchable really, and Red Bull didn't have an answer to it. Max Verstappen said he couldn't really do much, couldn't keep up with him, and his whole race really was waiting for Bottas to catch him back up and have a bit of a tussle just for second and third place. But in terms of that, Hamilton really deserved it, and like you said, that record, for how many times he's done that is incredible.
I think one thing to mention is Bottas finishing second. He stays top of the championship after 2 races, which again, early days. But Verstappen third for Red Bull. Have they missed the opportunities there, Jack? I mean, okay, Verstappen improved from last weekend, but overall, the Red Bull circuit, I think Mercedes might want to buy it off them.
Yeah, I think McLaren might even as well. I mean, the way they were impressing for the 2 races. I mean, like we said before, the first race in Austria, it was sort of Red Bull's opportunity. They've done so well on that racetrack in the last couple of years, and Verstappen, who's sort of taking control of it, and it just wasn't the case for the 2 races this time round. Mercedes just looked dominant. Even when they were having issues last weekend, they still looked like they were, more superior around the track than Red Bull did. I think, Red Bull have missed an opportunity. I think Verstappen, even though the car isn't as good, he still drives the wheels off it. I think the one person they do need to look at, and I think obviously that spin with Hamilton in the first race put a little bit of doubt in his mind, and he had a couple of spins in practice as well on Friday. I just think Alex Albon may have lost a bit of confidence from these first 2 races, which isn't good considering that, he is probably still fighting for that second drive at Red Bull at the minute.
And we'll talk about Albon now, because he could have lost 4th place, and it could have been a racing point at 4th for Sergio Perez. He was voted driver of the day, not wearing this T-shirt for any reason at all, the Pink Panthers, but racing point looking strong. But yeah, Albon, do you think there would have been more pressure on him if he hadn't stayed 4th at the end? Luckily for him, Perez's front wing was damaged, so he was able to seal it.
I think it's always a pressure for me. I think Verstappen obviously is one of them drivers that, I suppose like Bottas to Hamilton, it is very difficult when you've got a teammate like Verstappen in the team, and like Pierre Gasly found the pressure last year, and we thought, second to last part of last year when Albon came in, that it was sort of, Albon was getting the feelers in for the team, but it just looked like yesterday, when Verstappen needed a bit of backup between the 2 Mercedes, and Albon was sort of 20 seconds behind his teammate. I think Verstappen came in for a pit stop and came out ahead of Albon, who was only just coming around the corner, and it was just like, that's 20 seconds behind you are now. And as much as it was probably difficult to catch them up, he needed to make an effort. And I think it was a real telling sign when Sergio Perez, who I have to admit did a fantastic job.
That's the first time I've ever heard you say that.
But yeah, and I think if he had taken the position off Albon, that would have been a talking point for them to sit down in the debrief, because I think that the least Albon had to do was finish fourth in that race.
But at the end of the day, it's all about doing the 71 laps, and that's what Lando Norris did. He got fourth. He loves that circuit. I mean, he overtook 2 cars in the last lap, both Pink Panthers, Lance Stroll and Perez. I mean, Norris is. I mean, I don't know what to say about him, but surely the confidence will just grow and grow for him, because he's now third in the championship, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it looks incredible when you look at the championship table now. You see a McLaren in third place and a McLaren driver in
Take a picture.
Yeah, it won't last. Yeah, in terms of that, Norris has done a fantastic job. I think, being the McLaren driver who's going to be there for next year as well. I think it's great for that specific driver to be doing well, knowing that Sainz is off to Ferrari. Again, Sainz did a good job. I think both McLarens are doing well to make sure they're in the points, and they did a good job. I mean, just to point it out in terms of their strategy as well, I think the McLaren team did a good job in swapping them over at the right time.
Yeah,
made sure Norris got the opportunity, and Sainz was nice. Was good enough to sort of let him by a good time. I think at the very beginning, when Ocon and Ricciardo were fighting for pointless reasons, it was a bit silly that obviously Renault hadn't done the same thing in terms of team orders. But yeah, I mean, Norris, incredible job. It always seems to be there at the right moment. And even though there was a bit of a mess up in practice where he got that 3-place grid penalty, could have been where he could have been in the end if he'd not had them, 3 places on the grid would have been something special as well. But yeah, it's really looking good, and I think Hungary might be a decent circuit for McLaren as well. So it's looking good.
I must correct myself. He got 5th, not 4th. That was Albon, of course. I should have studied that, really. Normally he's used to podiums, Norris, so actually 5th. Yeah, rubbish.
Not good, is it?
Oh, well. But, I mean, quickly mention the Pink Panthers Racing Point. I've mentioned Perez being driver of the day. He started at 17th. Up and then finished 5th. Sorry, 6th. I'm getting it all wrong. But that car, it's doing. Surely Mercedes are looking at them thinking they're our number 2 team, helping us out in the championship right there, because there's actually some problems here and there. People say that it's it's exact model as the 2019 Mercedes, and Racing Point have taken that on board, which fair enough. But now Renault are complaining about it over the last few hours while we record this. So I don't know if it's going to take that serious, but do you think Renault may be overreacting, Jack?
I think Renault are trying to find some sort of way to keep up in terms of the pace. I think Ricciardo did a good job to try and keep Stroll and then obviously Norris as well. He did a good job to keep him behind, but at the end it just looked like he sort of lost his tyres, and Renault just didn't look like it could get away from the Racing Point, which just sort of says how well the Racing Point is sort of developed for this year. And to be honest, I think I've said this previously, if I was a team that was lower down the order, like a Racing Point, or was down the order, like a Racing Point or a Haas or that, I'd utilise anything that I could get from a top team. Yeah. If you can sort of use the drawings and then create your own sort of ideas, why would you not do that? Racing Point have just sort of taken that and excelled. Their car looks really good this year. I think Perez did an amazing job again on tyre management. He just seems to be an absolute god in terms of making sure he can get the best out of the tyres in a stint. And it was unlucky that he tangled with Albon. And I don't know if you've seen the video after he got out of the car from the sort of cockpit cam, but he just had his heads in his hands because he'd realised that could have been a 4th place if he'd hang on a little bit longer and maybe try to move somewhere else. And it was a sort of a missed opportunity, but a fantastic drive nevertheless. And it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this investigation that Renault have obviously put in, because I think there's talk that Mercedes are having to get involved as well.
Oh dear. Well, we'll see what happens. I'm sure we'll react to it if anything big happens. But yet again, Man City, they had something thrown at them and they got away with it. So, money talks. But we'll quickly talk about the Ferraris. In the words of Steiner, if it was his drivers, he'd call them fucking wankers after they crashed into each other. Jack, it's not the first time this has happened between Leclerc and Vettel, but Ferrari, the pace is slow, but they can't even finish a race now. What the hell's going on?
Like if any of the teams, like if there was one team on that grid that didn't, that the last thing they needed was an issue like this, it was Ferrari. They were very lucky, like we said in the review last week, to get the place that they did for Charles Leclerc and to get onto the podium last week, because the car wasn't fast enough really to get there. But, to not even make it around the first lap. I mean, Leclerc did another lap, I think, after he pitted, but the car was broke. So basically, both of them finished on the first lap, and it was the first time really that we can't really blame Vettel. Legit, he didn't do anything wrong. Went around the corner and just lost his front, his rear wing. It was a bit of a surprise. I think. Obviously, a lot of this happens on the first lap where people just sort of have an adrenaline rush, that you're all hyped up once the green lights go out. And obviously, Leclerc had one of them moments where he thought there was a gap. And, it did look like it. But when the cars are all bunched up, it can close really quickly, and obviously did that. And I just thought it was funny that it was the same corner that Vettel spun last week. That obviously isn't a good corner for the Ferraris. But I mean, they put new parts on the car. They did get upgrades, but they didn't even get run in to see if they were any good or not. So they're going into the third race weekend of the season, still not knowing if they have a decent car or not. But from what we saw in qualifying, the pace was still off.
And finally, I mean, it was called the Styrian Grand Prix, new name and all that, but it was the same race pretty much. Did you like it? Having the same circuit being used in the space of a week, first time ever to have happened in the same season. What were your thoughts on it?
To be fair, as much as I was thinking, okay, we had this last week, I did actually go into it thinking it's not going to be the same race. And we were worried a little bit that obviously that was going to happen. I think obviously the wet qualifying helped in the sense that the grid may have been changed a little bit due to the wet weather on the Saturday. And obviously the order wouldn't sort of be the same. But to be fair, it didn't bother me that much that it was at the same race circuit. I think I'm still sort of in that bubble that I'm just glad that the racing is back, if that makes sense. And just happy to sort of have the championship underway, see the cars out and having, stuff to talk about in terms of Formula One. So it doesn't bother me. I don't know if I'd want it, a yearly thing, if that makes sense. I wouldn't, maybe if they had it at the beginning of the season and then maybe had a second at the same track later on in the year. But I'm not sure a double header again at the same track would probably work. But again, I don't think that would be something that would happen. It's just what's happened over the last few months. But what would you think then? Are you any?
Well, I mean, we'll see it, won't we, again with Silverstone in a few weeks' time. But I didn't mind it. I thought it was interesting to just see what the results would be like the second time round, see if it would be any different. And I guess in a way it was, but if qualifying had been normal weather, what would we have seen? I'm not sure, but it was clear to me Red Bull Ring wasn't in favour for some cars, Ferrari, for example.
Red
Bull as well. If they don't win, it's a shit race for them, isn't it, basically? Yeah, I enjoyed it. I didn't mind it. I think it'll be interesting come Silverstone. But, of course, let's not forget as well, we're going to be in Italy twice in September, but with two different tracks, which I think is good to see. Obviously, Monza will be on the calendar as always, but Mugello, I love Mugello. It's an absolute, I've probably announced that wrong. I absolutely love that circuit. Just from my MotoGP gaming experience, it's very cool. And there's a lot of corners and long corners as well and spirals. So, what do you think to that, Jack? Obviously, more races added. We've got at least 10 now. Well, 8 left out of the 10. I think we're going to get more, though, aren't we?
I think it's only it's only a matter of time before a few more are announced. I think, like I said, I think the season's bound to end in Abu Dhabi, so that's only going to be announced once. Like, I suppose the final list is added. They're only waiting to see how many are going to be left. But I think Bahrain's in the mix as well. I think there'll be a Bahrain Grand Prix. So I think there's obviously still more to come. Sochi is okay for me. I don't mind it. I prefer playing it on the game to actually watching the racing.
Yeah, me too.
If that makes sense, in the Russian Grand Prix. But I mean, just to have another race is good. But I am excited because I don't really know much about it because obviously not watching as much MotoGP. I'm interested to see the second race in Italy at Mugello, and that'll be good. And like you said, it's different. Obviously we've had 2 races now in Austria/Styrian, and 2 races at Silverstone. But it'll be good to see 2 races in the same country but at different racetracks as well. But it'll be good actually to see the Hungarian Grand Prix this weekend, because obviously it's the first new track of the season, because we've obviously had the first 2 at the Red Bull Ring. So I like the Hungara Ring, so hopefully that'll be a good race as well. We obviously saw a battle between Verstappen and Hamilton last year. Will we see that again this year? Depends on Red Bull's pace, I suppose.
I must admit, I was a bit surprised Sochi got announced, just because Russia's. I don't know. When I last checked, the COVID cases there were pretty bad. And with Sochi being an Olympic park, it's not exactly away from people. I don't know. I'd imagine it's part of the city. So I honestly thought we would just be seeing circuits, proper circuits being used, and nothing like, well, I mean, for example, Singapore couldn't go on because it's in the middle of a city. So I think that's why I was a bit surprised. But yeah, it is good to see a few more races added on.